It's all yours.
Okay. So in the last webinar, we walked through a lot of the workflow features, how to get started with AfterShot, how to import, do cataloging, move through lots of photos really fast. And this time what we're going to do is focus on image editing, as Evelyn said. We're going to go through a bunch of samples, move through a lot of the different basic adjustment tools, some of the more advanced editing tools, do some layers, see how the non-destructive selective editing works. And then we're going to move to plugins. I'll show you some of the built-in plugins that are in the version that's shipping now, AfterShot 1.0, as well as some of the ones that we're going to be bundling into our next update that's coming out here in the near future. And I'll show you how to go get more plugins and how they integrate into the overall workflow. So with that, let's jump in. As we showed in the last webinar, everything in AfterShot is completely non-destructive. So as soon as you select an image, you can start making image adjustments, just one-click sliders, very easy to do. And if you don't like it, hit Control-R, and it goes right back to how it was straight out of the camera. So that's the basic process we're going to be doing, and we'll just kind of walk down the list and see how the different image adjustment tools affect your photos and what you can do to take simple-looking shots and make them look great. So first what I'll do is I'll start with a set of tone control, your brightness and darkness sorts of control. So we'll take a shot like this. I shot all these several years ago out in West Texas, and you can see that, let me make this as big as possible. How's that? This image has a very, very wide dynamic range. Up here in the sky, it's very, very bright, but the foregrounds, the road, the mountain here, is very, very dark. It probably just looks like a silhouette over the WebEx here. Not a whole lot of detail at all. So there are three controls that we're going to look at, four actually: exposure, highlight, recovery, fill light, and the blacks control. So the exposure control makes the whole image brighter or the whole image darker. And as you can see, when I make it brighter, I can see all that detail that were buried in those shadows. The road pops out, the hillside, all of that detail is now obvious. But I've blown out the sky. It's pure white. There's no detail up there, and overall, not the look we were going for. So instead, if I look at the fill light control, what it does is brighten the shadows without changing the exposure in the sky at all. So we can get very, very aggressive with boosting these shadows, or leave it kind of down like this. So you still get that little moody, afternoon thunderstorm kind of feel, but our sky is still perfectly intact. We still have all that cloud detail there. So the fill light is a great tool to bring out those shadows without blowing out your highlights. What you can do with any of these controls is just double-click on the name of the control, and it will reset just that one setting to default, whereas Control-R will reset everything, all the adjustments that you've made. So that's a nice little thing to remember as you're experimenting. You can try a lot of different things, and if you don't like it, that one adjustment, you can always hit Control-Z to undo, or just double-click the slider name or the handle right out here. Double-click right there, and that'll reset it as well. So we looked at exposure and fill light. Those are great ways to start getting more control over the over your image. If I take a look at this shot, you can see that I've got blown highlights. It was taken just a moment before that previous image, but the sky is completely blown out. Better exposure down in the foreground, the mountain and the road here. So if I go to my highlight recovery tool, that's where this is sort of the pair to fill light. So the mountain and the road don't change at all, but you can go from here with these blown out highlights, no detail at all in the sky, and then just start pulling back in that data, get the texture of the clouds and all that sky there. This is one of the few tools that only works on RAW files. You can't use highlight recovery on JPEGs or TIFFs. There's just no data in those files to go recover that blown out detail with, and that, as well as a few other adjustments, are some of the prime reasons why folks shoot RAW files instead of JPEGs. There's just a lot more data there to be able to save a shot that looks like that and get something that looks like that very, very quickly. Exposure, highlight, and fill light are great ways to get overall tone control out of your image. The next one I want to talk about is the black slider. So if we go down to a image maybe like this one, so it's got a nice overall exposure. We've got some highlights, we've got some shadow detail, so there's nothing really I need to change overall with the exposure here. But what the blacks does is it allows you to deepen the very, very darkest colors, not the shadows and sort of midtones that exposure and fill light work in, but just the very, very deepest shadows. So that's a great way to kind of anchor your images and make them look a little more deep. If we go back up to some of these buildings, this is the Prada store outside of Marfa, Texas, and if I move the black slider just a little bit, you can see the awning and the signs really get deep black and rich. So that's a great way to get nice and deep shadows and blacks, but without losing detail in the brighter shadows like the window here. Let me zoom in a little bit. So I'll reset that back to 0. See, this black is just a little bit gray, but we still got good shadow here in the detail in the shadows. If I boost blacks up just a little bit, maybe about like that, that gives me a nice rich black here, but I still have detail in the shadows. So it's a good compromise. So that's a look at the exposure adjustment tools. There's one other tool that operates on exposure, and that's auto levels. So if I go back to a photo with very let's see if I can find one with a limited dynamic range, maybe something like this. So if you look at the histogram shows the brightness that was recorded in the original frame. So over on the left are your shadows, over to the right, or in the middle are your midtones, and over on the right are the highlights. As you can see, this image is very, very neutral. Everything's right in the middle. A little bit of shadows, but nothing in the top quarter of the histogram at all. If I click on auto levels, what that does is it expands the highlights and the shadows to fill the full histogram, and then these two edit boxes here control how much of the image it shifts to either pure white or pure black. So what I think this did was actually over brighten the image. Now I could correct that with exposure, just drop that back down to something like that. Or what I could also try is just to lower these numbers a little bit to say don't boost it quite so much. And that still expands the histogram, but not quite as much as it did with the default settings. So sometimes it looks great out of the box, just hit auto levels, and you get something that goes from that to that, a whole lot more pop, better use of the available dynamic range. Or sometimes you want to adjust it after the fact a little bit and really tune to get exactly the kind of feel you want out of your photo. For this particular shot, I do like it a little bit darker, a little bit more moody. It was raining heavily in the background. It was sort of an overcast day. So with auto levels on at the default, it really overdid that adjustment and made it look less real than it actually was. So what I want to do is just kind of back it off like that. Maybe about there. So that's a good compromise between using the highlights, the right side of the histogram up here, but still retaining that original sort of stormy day mood. So that's a quick look at the exposure and tone tools. If I switch over to the tone tab, you'll see a lot of those same tools plus a little bit more control. Instead of just fill light, you also have fill light range, and the same is true with highlight recovery. If I go back to one of these very, very dark images, I'll show you how the tools on these other tabs will relate to the tools that are on the basic tab. What I'll do is I'll just take my fill light here and boost those shadows about like that. I'll do it all the way up. Why not? So we took an image that looked completely black and boring, brought out a huge amount of detail in these shadows while still preserving the highlights. which looks great. But what I can do is switch over to the Tone tab and start adjusting the fill range. What this does is it adjusts how much of the image it should consider shadows. So if I want it to do only the very, very deepest shadows, you make the range number very low. If I wanted to include some of the midtones as well, then you can start pushing it up, and you can see how this is affecting pretty much only the sky, because all of our foreground and the mountains were so dark anyway that they're in the deepest parts of the shadows, and they're not being affected until I get way, way down here into the very, very lowest end of the fill range. But you can see the fill light. This is on 2.5. If I switch over to the standard tab, it's on 2.5 as well. Any adjustment that you make here is reflected to the tool with the same name back on the other tab. That holds true for the color correction tools, sharpening, noise reduction. Most of these tools here are repeated on the other panels with added features and functionality on the other panels. For example, Noise Ninja and Raw Noise, if I switch to the Detail tab, each one of these has its own tool panels with a lot more features. So the Standard tab is a great place to start tweaking. A lot of the time, most of the adjustments that you'll need to do, you'll find on the Basic adjustment. But if you want a little bit more power, just click over to the relevant tab, and you'll see some more controls, more ways to tune your image and make sure you're getting the final image quality that you're looking for. So with that, we walked through the exposure tools. Now I'm going to walk through some of the color tools. And we'll start with saturation, vibrance, and hue. And we'll just look at these and the difference between saturation and hue, and then how these play. And we can also look at white balance, both presets and the slider and click white. So what saturation does, pretty obvious, is makes the colors a lot more rich or a lot more muted, all the way down to completely black and white. And saturation affects all the colors in your photo over the entire frame, corner to corner. And that's great on landscapes, maybe in the smaller, more subtle adjustments. Just go up just a little bit. It makes the yellow stripe in the road pop a little bit more. But if I go too far, it can start getting real artificial looking, especially in the areas that were already pretty saturated, like these rocks and the grass here in the background. What vibrance does instead is it saturates the portions of the image that aren't already pretty well saturated without overdoing the saturation in areas that are more saturated. So as you can see, as I move vibrance up, my sky gets richer, and the grass and stripe in the road get a little bit brighter, but not over the top. Much more subtle, much easier to control. So I usually start with vibrance. If I go to a new image that I'm just looking at for the first time, we'll take maybe one of these. So with something like this, I usually start with vibrance, see how that works. You can see the sky get richer, but the grass down in the foreground didn't change much. So it's a much more subtle, usually more natural looking image than saturation. But sometimes with landscapes, saturation works just fine. The overall image is all kind of muted. But yeah, you can see there it's getting too green, too yellow down here. Whereas vibrance is much more natural. Great color in the sky, but without overdoing the greens and yellows. What hue does, hue shifts the overall color of the image. So moving it this way makes everything a little more green, or makes the greens more blue, makes the blues more red. Kind of shifts things around in the color circle. So this isn't a tool I use very often. It can be fun to do like some selective editing with that. So you can come over here to an image like that and do color correction here. So what I've done is switched over to the color tab, and the color adjustments we were doing earlier were affecting the whole image. Either more saturated, less saturation, more vibrance, more hue. But what you can do instead is use this color correction tool to focus on just one color. So I can pick my blues, for example, and just make them more saturated. And the sky becomes more blue, but the green grass, nothing else in the image changes. So this is a great way to make your skies really pop without affecting the overall color of the image. Or you could shift the hue around only in the blues. So it's a neat way to get some creative effects. Hue adjustment's not something I use very frequently, and if I do, I try to use it very, very sparingly. Like maybe just makes the sky a little more pure blue instead of sort of soft and cyan. You gotta move it around just like that. Very, very gentle adjustments. It's easier to get stuff looking pretty crazy. Now, if you're doing more creative adjustments, you can use that to get sort of a crazy effect. If that's what you're going for. AfterShot is designed to give you complete control. You can do anything you want. Very natural-looking photos or very crazy, you know, Art Deco-looking adjustments if that's the route you want to go. Saturation, vibrance, and hue are great ways to adjust color in your image. Another way to do that is with white balance. White balance adjusts the overall image, so things that look white to your eye also look white on screen, which isn't necessarily the case. If you're shooting inside of a room, I don't have any indoor photos here, I don't think, but with different lighting, you'll get different white balance characteristics. And on these outdoor shots, the difference between you know, sunny and cloudy, shady, you can notice, but don't make a dramatic effect. The real dramatic effects start to happen when you're shooting in very warm light or very cool light, either with flash or incandescent lights inside of rooms. You can also just use the temperature slider a little bit just to change things around very subtly. You can make it a little more cool, more reminiscent of like an early morning shot, or a little warmer, a little richer, which is a great way to affect the mood of your photo. So even if the white balance is correct, you can adjust it a little bit to adjust the feel of your photo. So with that, we've gone through most of the tools here on the front panel. There's one up at the top called Perfectly Clear. What that is a one-touch image optimization algorithm by a company called Afintech. They make some really cool technology. It's basically just a one-click on-off tool. You've got a little bit of control over how it affects the tint. I just usually leave that alone. And what it does is it analyzes your photo, and it applies different kinds of adjustments to different portions of your image to try to give you the best looking overall photo. It does lots of things that you can't duplicate directly with the other AfterShot controls. It's not just setting the sliders on fill light and highlights, for example, or setting saturation or sharpness. It's actually analyzing different portions of the image and doing different sorts of adjustments. And it's sort of a great way to take you know, sort of an everyday shot and just say, hey, how would that look? It'll go in and run, analyze your image, and for these sort of landscape shots, it provides this great 3D effect. You get much more depth, and it's a great way to start to just say, hey, you know, how would this kind of dull-looking flat shot, how can I make that better? It's a great one-click tool to get beautiful-looking results really fast. Now down on the bottom, we've got controls for sharpening, Noise Ninja, and raw noise. So what I'm going to do is go back to that. Let's take this one here. So I'm gonna boost my shadows quite a bit, and then if I use my magnifying glass and look up here in the mountains, you can see that when I did that, I also boosted the noise. Let me just double-click to zoom into 1:1. So originally it looked like that. Nice and smooth. You can't really see the noise in this photo, but as you start to boost the shadows, you can find that it will boost the noise in those shadows as well. So there's always a trade-off between sharpness and noise. If I put my sharpening really high, the stones in the road, you know, really start to pop out, look a lot more obvious, but it also made the noise in the sky and the mountain here much more obvious. So what you can do is turn on Noise Ninja, which is just a one-click tool like that, or you can start to adjust it to rebalance that noise and sharpness and tune it to exactly how you want it. Do you want a lot of noise and therefore a lot of detail as well, or do you want it nice and smooth and just kind of preserve the tone? So it's a great way to get very detailed control out of your tools. It's hard to see the noise, sharpness controls over the webinar here, and whenever you're adjusting noise or sharpness, make sure you double-click to zoom to 100%, so you're looking at the actual pixels and not the scaled-down versions at 50% or lower, or you won't see the actual quality, the actual adjustment that that those things are making. So when you're making detailed adjustments, make sure you're looking at the details as well, not the overall picture. So now what I'm going to do is, so far everything that we're doing, I'm going to hit Control-R to reset this to default. Everything that we've done so far has been working on the main layer. If you look up here at the top in all these images, none of them have had layers. So we've been editing the full photo. What we can do instead is focus on just a portion of the image. So let me find maybe, where was that road with the mountain? Maybe this one. So I've got the road in the foreground. Let me put my light back up. I've got my road here in the foreground, then this hillside in the medium foreground, and the mountains in the background. And maybe I just want to brighten the hills and the road, but leave that mountain very, very dark and sort of menacing off in the background. It wasn't quite as dark as the rest of the image anyway. There was still a little bit of texture there. Fill light already had brightened just the shadows without blowing out the highlights, but it's going to do all the shadows, everything that finds in the image at those darker levels. So what I'm going to do is open my layer manager up here, and I'll move it down to the bottom of my screen so I can see both my adjustment tools and the layers here. So what I'm going to do is make a new layer and come in with my little curve tool and just click around. I can just barely see the outline of these hills, and then put a couple down here in the bottom corners, and we'll put one in there like that. A single click adds a new point, double click finishes editing. So now when I add my fill light, it's only going to adjust the bottom portion of the image. I'm going to click on the hand cursor here to make my regions go away. So you can see that what I've done is brightened the foreground shadows and left the background shadows alone. But if we've got this very unnatural separation between the two. So what I'm going to do is make my fill light adjustment a little more subtle, about like that. And then I'm going to move my curve, the feather on my curve. So if I go back to my curve tool, you can see how it moves from 100% adjustment inside to 0 adjustment outside this dotted line that's visible when you hover your mouse inside the region. And it will gradually taper off from the region out to that dotted line, and makes that adjustment a lot more subtle. So I'll switch back to the hand cursor to make that to make the outline of the region go away, and then just kind of feather in a little bit more, maybe about like that. So it's much more gradual with that adjustment. Now what I can see is that we've got this hillside that ends right here, and that's where I drew my region, and the feather is extending up into the mountain, and that's the part that's getting adjusted here, but I don't want it to. That's the part where it starts to look unnatural. So what I'm going to do is take my region again and make my feather smaller, and I'm just going to move these points down a little bit so it's at the bottom of that hillside instead of the top. And we'll try that. So now I'll switch back to the hand cursor, so you can see it's getting the foreground, and I can toggle off that adjustment altogether. So that's how it was straight out of the camera. This adjusts the shadows in the foreground, but it's leaving my mountain here, nice and dark and sort of menacing off on the horizon. So the layers tool are a great way to add that level of refinement, level of detail around what portions of the image you're adjusting. But they can also be used. Here's a neat little trick. So we'll go to a photo like this one. And let's hit Control-R to reset that to how it came straight out of the camera. What you can do, if you create a layer with no regions on it, then anything you do affects the whole photo. So what I'll do is do a little fill light to try to get some detail back out of the skies, highlight recovery to get detail out of the skies. We'll add a little saturation to really make the color pop, maybe drop the overall exposure, or let's just add contrast to really, really make that image pop. So I've added several adjustments to this layer that affects the full photo. But there's one neat difference between doing this on a layer and doing this on the main layer. One is you can toggle it on and off very quickly, and it toggles on and off all of those adjustments, the saturation and the contrast, any of the other adjustments you might have applied to this layer. Or you can just dial it back a little bit with opacity. So you can say, I like this look, but I overdid it a little bit. It's a little too saturated. It's got a little too much contrast. So what I'm going to do is just back off on all of those instead of just those tools individually. So this is a neat little trick if you're doing curves or plugins or groups of settings together that you want to experiment with backing them all off together. Instead of going to each slider and moving them up and down, you can just put them on a layer. Don't put any regions on that layer. It's going to affect the whole image, and you can toggle those on and off individually, or go from full effect to no effect, or anywhere in the middle. Great little trick there. So everything that we've done so far has been using the built-in tools in AfterShot. If you click back here on the plugins panel, you'll see the black and white plugin that ships with AfterShot. And we'll be including a couple more in our next update. But plugins in AfterShot are unique compared to plugins in any other raw workflow application out there because they work just like any other tool. All you do is click on and boom, it's black and white. Start adjusting the settings and the preview updates in real time. And if I go back to any of the built-in tools, I can make changes there without having to reapply the plugin. In most other applications, the plugin runs as a step at the end of the built-in raw non-destructive editing steps. With us, they're built straight into the pipeline. They're non-destructive. They work on layers and give you some really neat effects like that. So what I'm going to do is open up a web browser. I'll just bring it in over here. And if you go to AfterShotPro.com, you'll find a list of all the plugins that are available for AfterShot. So what I'll do is just download a couple plugins, install them, and show you how to really add to the core functionality by using these really cool third-party plugins to extend the capabilities of AfterShot. So one that I'll do here is ZText. This is a neat one to add text, either captions or watermarks, to your photo. So I just clicked on the link to come to the details page. On each plugin page, there's a link to download, and it downloaded right there. But I'm going to go get a couple of more. We've got one here. Let's see. I'm going to do ZFrame as well. This works great with ZText to add borders around your images, and then you can put a caption right down there at the bottom. We'll do that here in a second. I've already got Nostalgia installed. That's a great one. And we'll get one more, maybe Wavelet Sharpen. This has its own sharpen clarity kind of effect. The plugins are pretty small. They install very, very quickly, or download very, very quickly, so you can just get as many of them as you want. And then if you switch back over to AfterShot, you can say, let's install plugins. And then find the folder where they downloaded. They'll all appear right there with the AfterShot icon. Select them all and hit open. And this guy popped up on my other monitor, but it'll say, do you want to install this? And I'll say yes, and don't ask again. So it's going to install that one, and it installed the others. What I'm going to do is say, let's restart later, because I want it to install all of those other plugins. These keep popping up on my other monitor, so I'm just going to drag them on over here. ZFrame installed, and ZText installed also. So those were the 3 that I downloaded. So now I'll say restart now. So what that'll do is shut down AfterShot. It'll open back up with these plugins installed in just a second. And now you can see on my plugin tabs, there's Nostalgia, and here's ZText, and ZFrame, and Wavelet Sharpen, the plugins I just installed. So let's see how these work. Let me go to, say, this photo. What I'm going to do is hit Control-R to reset that, and we'll start with Wavelet Sharpen. What I'll do is just roll these up so they get out of the way, and we're looking just at that. So this offers its own sharpening adjustments. You can use the ones built into AfterShot, or you can use the ones that are provided here. Just touch the slider, and it'll automatically enable. Very, very quick and easy. What I like to use it for, though, is this clarity mode. So if I zoom back out, I can just turn on clarity. Now that's clearly over the top. But if I back off, maybe something about like that, and then we can toggle it on and off. Let's try that one. I think I backed off too much. This does a great clarity or local contrast enhancement that the core application of AfterShot doesn't offer. Let's try another one over here like this. Just hit the clarity mode, and you can see the before and after. You get a lot more detail, and it makes the darks a little bit brighter, makes the brights a little bit darker, and you get this sort of local contrast effect that works really great. And it's just another sharpening capability, liking if you want to do that. But a more obvious plugin are these 2 down here, ZFrame and ZText, which work great together. So let's go find a shot like maybe one of these, and I'll show you how it works. So ZFrame adds borders around your images. It's very easy. Just click. Let me make this just a little bit wider, and then you can set the size. We'll just tick it up just a little bit. That's too much. Let's do just 1 unit there. Then we'll do another frame around it that's a little bit larger. We'll make it 3, and we'll change the color of that frame to be white. And then what you can do is adjust the X and Y ratio and position. So what I'll do is slide it all the way to the top and make it a little narrower like that, so you get sort of that Polaroid feel. Make it a little bit bigger. Oops, that's not the one I want to be adjusting. I want it to be moving it up a little bit. Yeah, about like that. So you get the nice little Polaroid feel. I think that little black border is a little too big, so I'll come back in here and make it, 0.5 instead of 1. There. So very quick and easy. You can add these a photo frame to your photos. What you can also do is hit Control-C to copy those image settings. Go over to your next photo, hit Control-V to paste, and it will take on those settings as well. So it looks like, what I'll do is you can also hit Control-Shift-C to select what adjustments you want to copy. And I'm just going to copy all the ones from my framing plugin. And then go to my next photo here and paste, and boom, it takes on those exact same characteristics. And now what we can do is go to ZText. What I'm going to do is call this, put some text in here, Prada store outside Marfa, Texas, and turn it on. And then let's just drop it down to the bottom of the frame. Now it's white, so when it goes over that white border, it sort of disappears. What I'll do is give it a color, maybe like the sky up there. Or we'll just do black. There. And we'll move it up a little bit right there in the middle. You can also use these up and down arrows to really fine-tune where it's going to go. So you can add detail to your photos, you can add captions, you can add frames. All of this additional capability is very easy to build right into the application. It's completely non-destructive. You can hit Control-Shift-C, copy both the plugin and ZText settings, go to another image of the same store, hit Control-V, and it's going to take on both that caption and the frame. So it's very quick and easy to get really cool effects from both the built-in tools and the third-party plugins. So I think that's all that I had prepared. Evelyn, I'll turn it over to you. I'm sure we've got some questions that have come in while I've been talking away here, and I'd be happy to address those now.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Jeff. We do have a couple questions, and what I will start with, this one is going to do with the color tab. So the question is, when you're using the color correction tool and you're choosing a custom color, is there a way to kind of delete or remove that custom color selection apart from just undoing the step?
Yeah, there is. The easiest way to do it is that really only matters if you start to fill up all of these custom tools. So what I'll do is explain a little bit about what the question, give a little more context to the question for the folks that aren't familiar with this. So up at the top you have 6 primary and secondary colors. So you can say pick your blues and make just the blues more saturated. The sky pops the greens, and the other colors in the image don't adjust at all. What this bottom row of color wells allows you to do is either select another color from within your image, maybe like this brown, for some of the colors, anything other than the primary and secondary colors up here. But we only offer 6 of those color wells. So if you were to fill these up, you would need to delete them or replace them with something else. There's no harm to leave them there and just delete out the adjustment. So I've got this brown color selected but no adjustment. So if all you want to do is turn off the effect, then you can just turn off that effect by putting the adjustments back to 0, and that's good enough. But if you filled all of these up and you want to replace one with another color, you can just come back in and say pick this kind of muted green instead. You can pick another color over here. This image doesn't have a whole lot of different colors to it, but maybe this particular color of the sky. So you can't delete one of the colors, but the easiest thing to do is just to set its effect to 0, or just overwrite that color. You can come back in and say, well, we want that green instead. So now we've got 2 with very subtly different colors of green.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. There was a question as well for presets. We saw you using copy and paste, but one question was, if there's particular looks, what's the best way to save presets?
Yeah, absolutely. Saving presets is just like saving or doing the copy and paste. So if we look at this image right now, what I'll do is we'll go back to that blue and make the blue skies a whole lot bluer. So this image has several different settings applied. It's got our text and frame. It's got our selective color adjustment, and maybe we do any other adjustments that you want to apply to the image as well. So the basic way you make a preset is to adjust one photo like you want to, and then on the standard tab there is the presets tool here. Earlier I did Control-Shift-C to open up this selective settings dialog to say, which settings that I've applied to this photo do I want to copy and then paste onto another photo. Well, presets work just the same way. You hit the plus button and the same dialog comes up, and what I'll do is say Polaroid frame. So I will turn everything off except just my frame, like that. So this will make a preset called Polaroid frame with just my ZFrame plugin settings applied to it. And I'll hit OK, and it will show up in my list right there. So if I go to my next photo like this, I can turn on my Polaroid frame. I can go to my next one, turn on my frame there. So you can move through lots of images. You could select several of these at once and frame all of them at once, anything you want to. So that's a great way to add presets to really automate your workflow, get you to move through your image adjustments very quickly. I'll tell you about one more thing. So here's a quick list of presets that are visible when the presets tool is rolled up. So these are sort of your favorite ones. They're very easy and quick to apply because they're in this list here. And you'll see that Polaroid frame wasn't in my list. But I kind of like it, so I want to put it there. It's easy to do. Just click on the Manage button here and find your Polaroid frame and just check the in the Show column here. Hit Done, and there it is right there in my dialog. So what that's really handy for is if you keep this one rolled up and pinned, it popped up to the top of the screen here, and as you move through your other tabs, that presets tool stays there. So it's a great way to be able to very quickly access your favorites regardless of what tool tab you might be viewing at the time.
Cool, thanks, Jeff. There's a question here on what does the raw noise slider do?
Yeah, the raw noise versus Noise Ninja. Raw noise works very, very early in the image pipeline, and it's not designed to completely remove the noise. On something like ISO 1600, 3200, very, very noisy images, I tend to use both. But the raw noise is a great starting point. Noise reduction very early in the pipeline. It's nice and subtle. You're not going to lose a whole lot of detail. It's only available on RAW files, while Noise Ninja works on RAW files and JPEGs. So it's just another tool. The Noise Ninja tends to be a little more aggressive. It tends to really try to reduce all the noise in the photo, where the raw noise tries to be a little bit more subtle, runs very early in the pipeline, which means you're not sacrificing as much detail, and it's just a great starting point for any of your higher ISO or noisy RAW files.
Okay.
And then I'll just say as well, if you go back to the Details tab, the raw noise has these other settings. The impulse noise is on by default, so if you have stuck pixels, black or white pixels that are always on, this will go in and find those and mask those out automatically for you.
Well, it's a good thing you're on there, that tab actually, because it raised up the question here about the sharpening at the top. How is the Wavelet plugin different than those tools?
It uses completely different algorithm, and therefore gives you completely different results. So this sharpening is relatively basic. It's got an amount and sensitivity, so you can adjust your overall sharpness. Let's zoom into 1:1, like I suggested you do whenever you're looking at sharpness. And so this is just a great general sharpness tool. I use it on pretty much all of my photos. The Wavelet Sharpening just gives you a lot more adjustment, a lot more control. You can do a lot more different kinds of things. You can do creative things like this clarity mode that really do some aggressive adjustments. But it's just about options. It's just about giving you different technology, different capability. Yeah, there you go. You can see the difference between turning their unsharp or wavelet noise or wavelet sharpening on and off. It's a pretty dramatic effect, not just to the detail, but to the overall sort of clarity adjustment. So for things like this, where there are multiple plugins offered for sharpening or noise reduction, it's great just to experiment, try lots of different things, find the ones that work best for you, and then make a preset for them. So they're very easy to come back to and get that same feel later on.
There was another question too. I actually misread the last one, but this was for Wavelet. Wavelet Noise has a plugin, so maybe you could explain a little bit how that's different too.
It's a similar thing. The Wavelet Noise differs from the Noise Ninja in the basic underlying technology. The way Noise Ninja works is that we profile all of the cameras, all the raw files that we support, different ISO settings, different white balance points, so it knows ahead of time for your camera under certain lighting conditions or camera settings where the noise is going to be, where the detail is going to be, and it tries to go in and fix the noise without affecting the detail. Wavelet denoise just uses a different process. It's not profiled, so it doesn't have that sort of built-in starting point. which is not really either good or bad. It's just different. It's just different technology. You get different results. So I just recommend anybody that shoots it at high ISO, has lots of problems with noise, go in, experiment, try lots of different things, find what works best for you. And that's one of the key powers of AfterShot, is that it allows you to use either our built-in tools or someone else's. And you know, our goal is to provide the best image quality, whether you're using our noise reduction tools, our sharpening tools, or somebody else's.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. There is one more question here about, again, camera and file support. And I thought it'd be a good time to mention where the current list of supported cameras are on
Sure.
Corel.com, and then maybe you can just talk about how we're planning on releasing more.
Absolutely. Let me switch back over to the browser here. If we go to Corel.com/AfterShot, and let me hide those, and click on Tech Specs. Scroll down to the bottom. So here are all the raw files that AfterShot supports in version 1.0 that's out right now. We're currently working on an update that adds support for somewhere between 15 and 25 new cameras, those that were announced at CES and over the last couple of months that are just now coming to the market. So we're always eager to keep support current, keep adding in new cameras. We know, as a photographer myself, if I go out and buy one of these new cameras, I want to start using those raw files as quickly as possible, and we're very aware of that, so we want to make sure that we add that support in as quickly as possible.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. That's it for questions, but while you're there, actually, in the website, if you scroll to the top of that page, there's a resource tab, and I just want to point everyone out where the webinars are going to be made available. So on the resources tab, you can click on webinars. And we're going to be updating this page for add more resources as we go. You'll notice there's a little link there for AfterShot Pro. Next month we're going to be having another live session, so if you're more than welcome to sign up for that one. It's going to be about more image management, cataloging, and so on, and Jeff will be kindly hosting that one again. So what we'll do for today is we're going to record this and post it on our YouTube channel, and you can actually find us on the same page. If you scroll up, you see links to the YouTube channel, to our Facebook, and other ways to contact us. So that's it, I think. So thanks very much, Jeff, and we'll be updating this page and adding more resources as we go.
All right, thanks.
Cool. All right, thanks, everyone. Have a great day.